So that's the first layer of the above ground foliage completed. So that sort of blurry, indistinct layer where I've just let the colour blend a little bit, switched a lot between colours and started to define some of the trees and the branches. So now for the really exciting bit. It's all exciting, but this second layer is really going to bring that foliage to life and also bring light in, because with this second layer, we're aiming to achieve an increase of light, an increase of contrast, and therefore it should start to give us some indication of texture and layering of the foliage. So I've cleaned my palette and I'm going to start off with a brand new one because I think it's a great opportunity to get rid of some of that old tacky paint. Just be careful of that. The acrylics will dry as you paint. So don't think, I must use this last little bit of tacky paint. It'll ruin your mark making. So I've got myself a nice new palette and I'm going to get out exactly the same colours that I used before because I don't want to shift the colours. I want to just make them lighter, make them sharper, make them cleaner, make them brighter. So let's look at this area first. So if we look at the photograph, we can see that there's high contrast because that foliage is coming forward, much further forward than the foliage behind, which belongs to the trees in the distance. So we want to increase the contrast in these areas. So this is where I'm going to start. This is what I would call an easy win. So looking at this area, I can see that it's green and it's a yellowy green. So it's slightly lighter, particularly when you compare it to this. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of my yellow and a little bit of my Jenkins green. Now with this second layer, because you're determining, or you want a little bit more control over your colour and your tone, I would recommend doing a little bit of colour mixing on the palette first, but just a little at a time. Don't do a whole wodge of it because you're going to keep changing. So let's take a little bit of yellow, a little bit of the Jenkins green, and let's try that out with a couple of marks. Oh yeah, look. Now look how it's not too light. It's not quite the same colour, so I think I'm going to use my other green because I think it's probably closer to the permanent green deep, but it doesn't really matter. And what I'm doing is I'm placing my brush in areas that are going to give me a high contrast. So those leaves against the darker foliage in the background. I'm feeling quite confident about this area, so I'm now going to make these marks a little lighter. So I'm adding a tiny weeny bit of yellow to the same little squidge of paint on my palette. And I'm going to layer up another, oh look at that, few marks to really bring that foliage out. A little bit of yellow, a little bit of green, pop that on my brush, and a few marks on those areas that I want to really pop out. A little bit of, oh, we got here, a little bit of white added to that mix. So I'm getting braver. So also noticed I'm not just going over the dry, I'm also building up my marks as I go here. So look, that was my first mark. This is my second mark. So I'm overlapping and layering. And what's really important in this area is that you don't get stuck with one colour. Just like we did with the first layer, keep going back to the palette, keep changing your colour, because it's going to make it look a lot more exciting and a lot more natural. If you're not sure, just add a little bit of green or add a little bit of yellow and just think, well, let's see what that looks like. It doesn't have to be mathematically precise. Just keep changing. Maybe make it slightly lighter, or maybe if we go back to the photograph, which is always a good place to go when you're stuck and you want a little bit of inspiration. So if we just go back to the photograph, we can see that we actually have a little bit of orange in those areas. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of orange. It's quite intense orange, so I'm going to have a little bit of yellow with that too. I haven't cleaned my brush. There's a bit of green on there, but let's see what that looks like. And let's just put in a little bit of orange. Oh, that looks great in some of those areas. And look, we can be a bit more confident with the orange because I've already laid some orange down here, but let's really ramp that up. Now, this is feeling exciting. I'm getting really stuck into it, but let's step back. Okay, probably too much orange, which is fine because we can overlay that right now by adding a little bit of maybe yellowy green. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of yellow and random green. Just mix it a little on the palette, and then let's just go over some of those oranges where I got a bit overexcited. And that, I think that green could even be a little bit lighter. So I'm increasing the yellow and the white. There we go. That's just putting those oranges back a bit. Look at the effect that's now had. That's given me another colour, sort of orangey greens. So it's actually added to the interest of the painting. So there's never a mistake. Okay, let's carry on and see a few more places. So I'm going back to a yellowy green, mixing a little bit of a yellowy green on my palette. And then let's add a few more marks back to my palette, yellowy green. Maybe let's make it a little bit different by adding a bit of white in there. And let's go down here. Oh, look at that. Maybe a little bit more there. Okay. So I'm stepping back. I'm using the photograph as reference. And I'm really thinking two things. I'm thinking contrast and light. The photograph shows me where the edge of this foliage line is, but also I'm guided by the work I've already done. So following some of the light patches that I already created with the first layer. Now in these areas here, I'm not going too light because it's actually quite dark to start off with. So I am echoing the work I already did, because you don't want to jump up too light too quickly. Think of them as steps and stairs. You're not launching yourself up 3 flights, 3 stairs at a time. You're just going up maybe 1 or 2 steps away from the tone that's already there. Because there's really dark colour there, so I can really create some really strong marks, silhouette against a darker area. But largely, Make that a little bit more yellow to change it away from the others. Oh, that's quite bright. So you see how that really light colour against the very, very dark really jumps out. So it's very powerful. And this is what I'm sort of trying to avoid too much over here, because that's a big leap of steps through tonal values. But here it's just giving me really high contrast and really bringing those leaves out. So think at the edge of this area of foliage, we can afford to jump up quite a few steps in the tonal range. But where we're working within, we want to keep it a little bit more subtler, so it doesn't look too jarring. So that top area now is really beginning to pop out, and I think I'm happy with it. I don't need to be completely happy with it. I think I'm okay with it. What I'm going to start to shift to now is the sky. So this is a little bit of a weird one, really, because in a lot of the places I'm going to be painting the sky back on top of the foliage. So I need to be careful that it doesn't look like that's what I've done. So I'm going to start off in an easier area of the sky, which is going to be this area here. So I can really start to establish the colour that I want to use and maybe develop a little bit more contrast of some of those silhouetted greens over there, and perhaps even bring in a few more branches. I'm going to pick up a little bit of the blue and the white. So let's start off here and just create a more solid looking sky. See how it's the same colour that I'm using over the same colour. It's just giving me a nice solid hue as we go further away from the black underpaint. Now, I don't want to just slap this all over and get rid of all of the darker areas, because I want the sky to remain interesting. So I'm going to leave a few of those darker blues coming through, and I'm now going to start working into the foliage. So can you see, if I just make a few little marks with my brush, I'm really working negative space. So what I'm leaving, the green here, all these little bits of green, I'm imagining they're the bits of foliage that are hanging with the sky coming in between them. Now, it doesn't always work. Sometimes it can look exactly like you've just put the sky on top of the foliage. But we have an answer to that, of course. See, look where I'm working, where the green is a little bit stronger. It looks a little bit heavy. So I'm going to mix up a little bit of the permanent green deep and the yellow. And I'm just going to make a few marks around the edges of those marks of sky. Maybe right up against it, maybe slightly overlapping it. And that is going to help push those sky marks all the way back. And at the same time, it's helping me lift some of this foliage that's in this area. So let's also bring some of the foliage into the sky. Oh, I love that. Fab. Happy with that area. Feel like a genius. Let's continue. I'm going to mix up a tiny weeny bit of my blue and brown mix and just run a stilted mark through. So that gives me a little bit of branch. Let's go down here. It's a bit scary. Oh, I quite like that. Okay, this is probably a good point to talk about brushwork. So let's just look at the branches as a starting point. I'm using my brush. So to begin with, there is not much paint on my brush. I've only got a little bit at the top. And then I'm using my brush perpendicular, so it's creating a right angle with the canvas, and just letting the brush fall down. So I twist the brush as I create the branch. The great thing is, if you don't like the branch, you can just paint back over it with the foliage. Easy. Don't think or don't be bound too much by the shape of a leaf. You can get stuck into trying to create maybe a leaf shape and create that shape constantly over the painting. We're creating the illusion of foliage, so we don't need to be too literal. The fact that we've got green and tall vertical tree looking things means it's going to read as foliage. Now if we look at the brushwork for the foliage and the sky, notice how I'm using the brush. Rather than perpendicular, I'm angling the brush. So I'm angling the brush more parallel. There's still an angle though, more parallel to the canvas. And that way I can deliver a larger mark and also put a little bit more paint on the canvas. The other thing is look how I can angle my brush in lots of different ways. So I can just use the side of the brush or the whole width of it, or perhaps even move the brush as I make the mark to create different shapes. It's probably worth practicing this, but look how I'm constantly rolling the brush in between my thumb and my fingers in order to create lots of different marks. The way that you make your marks is going to be very individual to you. It's as individual as our handwriting. So you're going to hold the brush slightly differently, you're going to use slightly different pressure, you're going to angle it slightly differently, and your movement is going to be different as well. So you're not going to get exactly the same marks as me because you're you. So you'll create something even more individual because it will be your marks. But do just be aware of what you're doing. Think about the angle of your brush, the pressure of your brush, how much paint is on your brush, the movement as you glide the brush onto the canvas. So have a think about all these different variables, and that will help create a whole different range of brush marks. You might be lucky and it might just come naturally, but I think most of us have to really think about what we're doing when we start painting and really think about how we're using our tool to create different shapes. This is a personal thing. I'm not much of a fan of a squidge because I don't feel like you have enough control to really think about what you're doing. But that's my personal opinion. So what I mean by squidge is a stipple. So where you get paint on your brush and then you just, I really hate it so much, I can't even think about doing it. You just push the paint in. And to me, it can be a really effective way of working or creating foliage. But I think it's a bit like potato printing, to be perfectly honest. because you're just going to get the same imprint over and over again. And also, you're going to get exhausted. Your arm is going to get really tired. I don't want to say that there are rules or that never do anything, but when I teach, I normally ban stippling from my classroom. So now I'm going to start working on this area. And if we go back to our reference material and also look at what we painted before, we can see that there's a lot of light down here. And that light is going off into the distance. So in fact, it's behind these darker bits of foliage. So we've been painting foliage to give the illusion of it being in front of this dark foliage. And now we're going to be painting down here, the light in the distance underneath or further behind that dark foliage. And hopefully that would mean we don't actually have to paint into the dark foliage, because the dark foliage is dark. And what we're doing here is creating light and contrast. So if we concentrate on the light areas and bring in the contrast there, this middle area of darker foliage should reveal itself naturally. So of course we have exactly the same colours down here, but what we do have that's different is that they're a lot lighter. So I'm going to use exactly the same processes as before. So this time I'm going to go for a little bit of yellow, tiny weeny bit of the green, and quite a lot of the white. Make this lovely light green. And I'm going to take this straight into here. Oh, it's a little too light. Remember about stepping up slowly through the tones. So I'm just going to mix a slightly darker version, maybe even darker still. That's better. I'm a big fan of think it, feel it, do it. So, which really means don't overstress or overfuss. You're not going to know what a colour looks like or whether it's the right colour until you've put it on the canvas. On the palette, it's just going to look like a colour on white, but on the canvas, it's going to have context and it's going to help you judge, as I just did then, whether it's too light, too dark, or the wrong colour entirely. I'm not looking at the photograph at the moment, completely forgotten about it, because I'm following a lot of the patterns that I already placed down with that first layer. And when I get a bit stuck or I'm not sure about what's going to work, then I will refer back to the photograph. Okay. So as we did with the sky, look how I'm just breaking into those darker areas with my lighter foliage. So this is a lot lighter. So I just have to be careful that it looks realistic. So what am I left with? I'm not too sure about that. So I am going to get my dark green and I'm just going to repaint and develop some of that foliage back in. There are never mistakes, just opportunities. So that has given me the opportunity to feather in a little bit more foliage from that silhouetted dark area that looks a little bit more convincing. Let's just zing out this orange. Is that too light? Oh, might be, but I like it. Bring a bit there. Oh, look at how that's really brought the light out and how it is working to create the illusion of that dark foliage, sharpening up the bottoms of it, sharpening up the edges of it, so we don't really have to paint too much into that area. And we also have the opportunity here, let's make a little bit of a bluey green, a little bit of blue with a dark green. I think we can maybe lighten some of this foliage that drifts over the trunk of the tree. So can you see how important it was to keep changing colour on our first layer? Because that's given us some clues as to how we can keep changing colour with our second layer, but it's also giving us opportunity to create this wonderful sense of layering. If you use the same colour over too large an area, it's going to look flat. And now it's the time to step back. Always finish just before you think you should. And I'm just stepping back now and having a look at it. And what strikes me at this point is we need to make sure that the thing that we haven't been painting, this dark foliage, is working. Because in the original photograph, certainly for me, it's one of my favourite bits, the lovely shapes that that dark foliage makes across the canvas. So I want to make sure I haven't lost that. I'm pretty happy with the shape that's made across here, but what I'm not happy with, this funny little ending here, there's almost a straight line where that dark stops and the lighter begins. If I look at the photograph, it's less distinct. What I want to do is I want to create a sense of this going down along the branch rather than stopping off there. Now, this is up to you. Stand back, have a look at your image and decide what it is that you like, what it is that feels a little clunky, and how you might fix it. If you're not sure, go back to the photograph, because that's going to give you a point of reference that you can either agree with, oh yeah, I'll make it lighter, or go, yeah, that isn't what I want. So if that isn't what I want, then maybe it helps me to see what I do want. And what I want is to create that lovely long shape coming down here. So I'm going to let the light come up a little bit either side, and then I'm going to bring some darker marks back down to give me that elongated look down there. So let's just recap what we've done today. We've looked at creating a second layer onto that first blurry layer. And the second layer has created light and contrast, and also maybe develop some of the colours to make them look a little bit brighter, not just lighter, but brighter. We've not covered the whole of the canvas, just areas where we want to increase light and increase contrast, maybe even to correct a few things that we didn't like before. And by doing that, we've created a sense of depth within the painting. It's interesting at this point. If you can really see into the foliage, then you know you've got a good painting. So if you're looking at your own painting thinking, it looks a little flat, I haven't quite got the layers that I want, then don't worry. Once we get the path in, that's going to give us a dimension that's actually taking us through the woods, that wonderful line of perspective. So any weakness up here may be solved by what you bring down here. So this is my point. If this isn't quite there, don't overdo it. Get onto the next area, which we're going to be doing in the next instalment, where we start looking at the foreground, the pathway, and all the foliage. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.